Thanks very much, certainly, for the welcome I've had over the last 24 hours, Jimmy, and for reminding everybody who I used to be. When you get to my age, and I've had an ongoing association with Australian football now for, I'd hate to tell you, work out how old I am, but 50 plus years, and I've had the privilege of being able to work, parallel involvements, both in football and in teaching, for that period of time. It's meant I've had some very good bosses, if you like, who've recognised the wisdom of trying to get some balance in a person's life and have allowed me to do it. It became more difficult as the game became professional, extremely professional in Australia, and so at the end of the 2000 period I retired from coaching in that part of the game. But I've been a part of an Indigenous sport, the same as the Gaelic games are Indigenous to Ireland. Obviously, Australian football has been Indigenous to our country. And it evolved very slowly for 150 years almost. Our game has been in existence. And there was not a great revolution at any stage up until it did, in fact, become professional, probably in the middle 90s. And then there was a massive revolution in the game, as you would expect. And because of the revolution, change took place at a huge rate. And the interesting thing, being an Indigenous game, where we had to go was outside our own country and outside our own sport to actually get the ideas from all the other invasion games in the world, including Gaelic football. So lacrosse and soccer and two forms of rugby and basketball, all of those games become the foundation for our thinking change in a game which was just positional, and the ball was moved up and down the ground and there wasn't great fitness required to play it, not a massive amount of skill. And then all of a sudden this revolution took place. And it's been fascinating for me today. I've probably had a greater education than I'm going to give you in the next couple of minutes, because of the factors I've heard today in the discussions in each of the sessions, which suggest that we're following very similar difficulties in our game at present. My interest initially, I was a primary, secondary and still remain a tertiary teacher, was in the primary school element. So I just want to give you just a little bit of background here so you understand where I'm coming from. My primary school work has been researching why children come into, what are the motives that drive them into sport, what are the reasons that they stay, and then the reasons which we've talked about today why they drop out. That has been a fascination for me, and it continues to be today, and it hasn't changed all that much in the last 25 years. Despite we talk about the different age groups and the different generation gaps that we've had, the reasons for children coming in today remain almost constant with what they suggested 25 years ago when we asked them the question, why are you here? The answer was fun, and I've heard the word fun a lot of times today. But in reality, what does fun mean? And fun isn't necessarily that lovely buzz in the tummy that we get when we're in control, we're in the zone and things are happening. Fun is very specific for kids of that age. I want to expand that just a bit. The professional football involvement for me at the moment is a struggle with a very, and I know this won't be on the headlines in the papers in Melbourne tomorrow, but a very difficult position we are in. We're developing almost the most unbalanced group of people in Australian society right now are AFL footballers, because they chose their parents well and they can kick and catch a football, they can run around a game and be paid $1.5 million for doing it in a year. We get some very unbalanced, inflated people about who they really are. That's quite sad. That's why I prefer to go and watch amateur football on a Saturday afternoon than going to the MCG and watching AFL football, because I understand the motives for the people being there. We are having great difficulty in convincing the coaches in our game that these people should be treated in a holistic sense. That we know that the disciplines, etc., which they gain from their involvement in playing our game are transferable during and after to other elements of their life, but the reality is we need them to become focused on other things other than their football. We cannot win that argument at the moment with the AFL coaches. So providing some sort of balanced life for our players is almost impossible. And then what we've been talking about mostly today, I've had a last decade of involvement with the youth participants in a local competition in Melbourne, which I have an interest in, and I want to share some of the things that we've learnt from those young people. I'm currently involved, and the one good thing about the AFL, I'm finding things that are good, the one good thing they do, as some may have realised now, for the first time we became a $1 billion business in 2012 out of the agreement which they've got from television, a $1 billion business. Of at least $500,000 of those dollars are given to a research board. And I've had the privilege of being a part of the AFL Research Board for the last 12 years. It is a group that if we have any stakeholder in our game, whether you're a coach or a player or a medico or a statistician or whatever you are, and you have a problem with the game, that you think by resolving that problem you'll make it better to play, more enjoyable to watch, safer for the participants, whatever else you might like to apply, we will give money to the research behind that to find out what in fact is going on so we can make some decent decisions. And one of the great joys in my life is having been a part of that, and we've been able to validate, which we're doing at the moment. We're actually doing a longitudinal study, which we've taken the performance of every single player in the last 2 years. We've got an equation to be able to produce a performance level. We've taken that and we're comparing it with their NFEs, as we call them, their non-football engagement. We're trying to see if there's some relationship with those who are getting their heads into something other than their football involvement and their performance level. Will they play more consistently? Will they have a longer career? Will they have, and I'd hate to say this publicly, will they be producing less antisocial behaviour? And will they, in the finish, make the transition into non-football life a little easier and a little better? Now, it's not going to be resolved in 2 years or 10 years or whatever, but I'll certainly be dead before we have the answer to that question. But it's a fascinating study as we try and convince the coaches, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are better to be full-time heads into their sport and ignoring the other aspects of their life. Some of the background we've already, Pat Daly, I've read his Coach 10 model just a little while ago when he visited us in Melbourne. Fascinating look at what he thinks needs to be done in terms of the coaching process. We listened to Jean Coté today. That is the best article. If you're looking for some structure in which to work, I think he's produced the best article worldwide on the integrated definition of coaching effectiveness. He worked with a fellow in Australia called Cliff Mallett, who's done some terrific work back in 2007, and we've just completed in the AFL what coaching effectiveness is, really, so that we can start to appoint the best possible people into the roles and then judge them against the characteristics which we think are important. I think it's relatively simple to define an effective coach, and that's what I've tried to do. Certainly Jean Coté this morning gave a more definite definition, but a more involved one, but it basically said the same things. What concerns me most, and it will be with the GAA as well, it's much more difficult to find, recruit, educate, develop and retain the people who are optimising the performance of their athletes individually and as a team, but at the same time developing them in a holistic sense. And thank goodness that's come out in almost every session that I've been to today, that we're looking at more than the athlete, we're looking at the person as a genuine, whole individual. group, those children, that's in our beginning program called AusKick, which is Australia-wide now. It's been adopted by all states and all bodies associated with our game. When we've talked to these kids, and I just want to underpin this again, so that those of us who are, and I'm now an AusKick coach of my grandson who started for the first time this year as a 5-year-old. Doesn't think I know anything about it, but we have a great deal of fun on a Saturday morning. They run an hour's program. And what we do know, and this is what I want to reinforce again, that basically there are 11 or 12 motives which bring these kids into that particular environment. But these are the 4 or 5 which are essential for them staying and improving in the environment which you create as a coach. These are all parents. Our little program this year had 128 children in it, and the last weekend that I counted, we had just on 200 parents supporting the program. It wasn't left as a babysitter. They were there in the good terms of the GAALearning thing. They were there as a part of the family. And we adopt these people. We have coordinators who are trained, but then we use the parents to teach. I think it's reasonably successful, I think. But this is what the kid wants: make me better. The moment he realises or she realises they're not getting better is the first reason for them disappearing. And we got their teammates calling them uncas, uncoordinators, and veggies, vegetables, and all the names that kids use these days. Boards, I heard the other day, and I wonder what that was. That's floorboards. Everybody walks on them. It means you're not too good. And these kids are actually, giving a qualification of ability to their teammates. Make me better. If I'm going to have these skills, for goodness sake, let me use them. So we've got to organise games that will allow that to happen. I think the kids have got it wrong. I reckon that should be number one. A good coach relationship means that this person is going to teach me to be better, but also give me the opportunity to play. And we should never underestimate, as you well know, that one of the major reasons for them coming in the first place is that their friends are there too. And competing and trying to win is essential. We're running away from it in our country at 100 mile an hour, the competitive aspects of it, but it is important to the kid. We put the pressure on as to how important it is, but the child wants to be part of a competitive environment. And as we've already suggested, I've heard it 5 or 6 times today, 80+% in our game, in our country, of kids dropping out, particularly at this age group, is related specifically back to the coach or the lack of coaching that they get.
Under pressure though. Bunting again, good vision, spotted a man standing out wide.
I have to admit,
Again, the quick kick, this time by Gray. And it's Heppel.
With a reconstructed shoulder. He's got a lot of confidence though.
Speaking of confidence, this man certainly has, and that's Adam Kearney. He's the number 1 pick and he's a ready-made player.
He is. Can't wait to get to Whitten Oval and get a pre-season under his belt, but he, all things being equal, would play round 1 next year for the Doggies, straight into the midfield. Exquisite.
Just to go somewhat quickly, because you've been very good for a long time, that group is the one that we've spent most time on today, is our secondary school age group, or the youth group as we call them. And we've done fairly heavy research with those over the last decade. And they're telling us that they get involved in our game because it's fun. The fun is it's a challenge. It's a difficult game to play. We claim that we think it's the most difficult game in the world to play. I think you'd probably argue that yours is. It's fast and it's high scoring, and it's a challenge to be a part of. Their peers consider it in our country as a very high valued skill. To be able to play Australian football has a high respect in our community, and therefore it makes them feel good about themselves. The team-based orientation, which we know provides recognition and dreams of AFL glory, being a part of it, and the physical nature. There is a courage associated with which is also a high peer value. But they're also saying they're turned off by 2 serious and abusive coaches. Now, this Yarra Junior Football League, which I happen to be a part of their advisory board and the patron of it, and it's just a quick insight. We've gone in the last decade from 6,000 to 10,000 registered players. Now, we might be pinching them from other competitions, but there's been quite a significant increase in the number of registered players we've got into this competition. We play from tackers, which is under 9 without any competition. That is, they don't keep the scores and they don't have finals, etc. They do fairly quickly after that. 10s, they have games which are competitive but no finals, but by 11 years of age they're into games, real games, ladders and finals to decide the winner of the competition. So we go fairly quickly, and that might be a little invariance to what's happening at the show. I'm not saying it's good, bad or indifferent, but that's what this association decided. On average of the 10,000 kids that are playing now, 950 get through to what is the Colts. And the Colts is 16 years of age. 950 we retain on the way through. And then the fascinating story in numbers, I'm trying to put the numbers up this way, the only way I can remember. Of those 950, on average in the last 10 years, 28 of them have got into what you would call the elite pathway. They have been chosen by recruiters as the real talent. And they are adopted by areas, like your counties, they are adopted by areas around the states and developed as a small group, usually 50 or 60 players in their age group. Of the 28, 7 actually get drafted into AFL clubs. 1 in 4 of those actually get a chance to go and play and go onto an AFL list. In the decade, we've had 4 only. Now, given that there's a 3-year apprenticeship in most cases to get there, it takes even the really talented players 3 years to get there. We've had 4 only that have had a 100-plus game, and we think that's a significant career in that particular time. 4 who've played 100-plus games. That's 1,000 dreams that have been smashed along the way. Few make it. What I've been doing, with permission from parents and coaches and from the association, is talking to these better kids about the program that we bring them in for. They play representative football in the same way that is played here. They played at 12, 14 and 16. I've had the 14 and 16-year-olds when they're starting to get a bit serious about it. I've workshopped with them. I've brought them in and sat them down and talked to them and tried to facilitate some discussion as to what they want from this participation, being with the best in representative teams. What do they really want? And it's been a fascinating insight for me. There are lots of things, but the significant 2, which keep coming up each of the 3 years now that we've done it, keep coming up and hitting me right between the eyes. One is, if you're going to give us this experience, give us the best possible coaches we can have. We don't always get them in the club situation. So if you're going to bring us into here, find people who in a short period of time, because they only play 1 or 2 games each season, give us the best coaching possible so that we can be given the best opportunity to improve the skills that we have. Now, that's not so easy to find those people, but it starts to worry about what they think they're not getting at their club level. And so we try to provide those. We've tried to educate and qualify the people who are going to take them and give them an idea of what they really want. But what is really stuck in my gizzard is that they are talking already about, give me a coach that cares about me beyond my capacity to play the football that I've been chosen to play. Now, that's absolutely significant. These are kids at 14 and 15 and 16 years of age who are saying, I want this coach to make me better in terms of football, but I want them to be involved in my life in the broadest possible sense and to care about me as a person in its entirety. That's a huge ask for having people for a short period of time, and this is an expectation of them. We've had lots of discussion about that, how it can be done and what they need to do.
And Matt Louis, what a mark!
To Davis. Oh, again, miraculous play from Leon Davis. He is on fire.
Zaharakis, brilliantly done.
Revolt, brilliant pickup it was.
Years, Martin, Swan, magnificent pickup and going for goal. Brilliant.
Here's Monfries. Looks at what's on offer, not much, so he kicks for goal! It's a beauty! Where's Eddie? Walker's got to sit here.
That group, obviously, and just to put the cream on the cake, I guess for the professionals or the semi-professionals or the elite amateurs as we have, their motives and drives and satisfactions are similar in a way, recognised as talented sports people, high value, as we said, in Australian society, gives them the opportunity to have fame and fortune. And what they're talking a lot to me about now is taking control over their lives. It's interesting that Jean Corte this morning talked about the book that he read, which is called Drive, a fellow called Daniel Pink. If you want to read a good book and understand what it is that really intrinsically motivates people to do the things that they do or don't do, read that little book called Drive by Daniel Pink. And this is where they can take, being good at this particular thing, they can take real control over their lives. The powerful social affiliations again, and the excitement of the intrinsic challenges. But what fascinated me in this discussion, and I happen to be president of the AFL Coaches Association too, and we've been able to have access to the players in their discussions with me, because I'm looking after the livelihood of all the AFL coaches. Not easy to do as they get sacked at a rapid rate. I think we had 7 go under in one season in this last season. It hasn't been much fun dealing with those, but we're dealing with it better. The exit interviews and the way we're supporting them, including through the AFL, has been extremely good in my opinion. But what the players are telling me, that it's only up to a point where the coach is as significant as I would like him to be. They get to a point where they've actually got control of their own game, if you like. They know who they are and what they're capable of doing and how to perpetuate that. They know those sort of things. They need direction, obviously, to coach on game day and the team cooperative and keys, all of that. But they get to the point where coach is important, but not nearly as important as they start to take real responsibility and become accountable for their own performance. I've never thought of it from that way. But they're indicating clearly to me that when they get into that period between 24 and 28, when they're playing their best football, they're almost taking ownership and independent of the coach in a real sense. That didn't make me feel all that good because I thought we were the most important people in the show. That's our structure, very similar to the one I saw thrown up before. Doesn't say much more than it's happening in most other, I guess, sporting bodies in the world, that we have that foundation, the school and the club system working in harmony, and it doesn't. We have the same problems. The private schools in Australia run their own sport programs and will not let us access their good players. That happens. So we've got great difficulty. The government-run systems will allow it. So we have this on. We have the ongoing problem of children young adults being asked to make a decision about which game they're going to play, and that's happening earlier and earlier. Australian football struck a snag this year. For the first time, we had 2 players who were going to be in our top 10 drafts actually chose to play cricket. We nearly had a seizure at our AFL house that 2 people were going to go and play this other stupid game because they can go off and play in the IPL in India and earn $370,000 without playing a game, as one of the young footballers didn't even enter the playing field to do it. So there are other alternatives available. So we've got to work a bit harder to maybe keep the talent. But then we have the selection process that goes on, like most other sports, to get these kids in. We have, though, finally, and this has just come into fruition in the last 12 months, a coaching development pathway. And we now have our senior coaches not necessarily playing AFL football at the top level, but have worked their way through the system and shown that they can actually coach despite the fact they weren't very good players, or not. They weren't great players and played the game, and they're having some success, which is terrific. So we can work our way through the system. And you can see there that all levels of the competition are supported by all levels of courses and qualifications. And the one at the top, the AFL High Performance course, now has become the lead-in to a degree at one of the universities in AFL football. Would you believe there is a university offering a high performance degree which has a coaching major and a management major so that coaches can go left or right. If they get sacked, they can go into the management role, etc. And I think that's a wonderful thing for our sport, something which golf and tennis and things have been doing for ages. Australian sport, Australian football has finally got that. Quickly. There is a massive change from our players. That's a lot of information on one slide at the one time, but down the left is the part-time amateur boy before he's drafted. And we've had the problem, as there appears to be in Ireland now, where a 16-year-old could or used to be able to play with mature adults of 21, 22 in an open age competition. Doesn't happen. We've now got rid of 16s. We've just accomplished it with 17s, and now you can't be drafted into the system until you're 18 years of age. Now, there's been a massive argument and debate along the way to get that recognised and changed. 16s would still be capable, but a lot aren't. They are physically, socially, technically, tactically, emotionally immature. It takes them 3 years once into the system to actually get to the stage where they can cope with the level of competition which is going further and further away from any of the underage or junior competitions that are being played. It's a massive difficulty. We've gone from one senior coach in the AFL and an assistant to, I was in the Hawthorn Football Club the other day, they have 8 coaches and a secondary coach who is the high performance manager who's responsible for the performance of the coaches. And the finish, I think, no wonder I look up in the grand final and there were 22 players in one case, 23 lined up on the ground, and standing on the sidelines to sing the national anthem were 27 support staff. That means for every one player that's running around, there's 1.12 staff saying, how can I help you? Can't believe it. But we've got to that sort of stage, and I guess you're supposed to be able to do better in your preparation and performance by doing that. So the part-time amateur goes from 8 hours a week to 40 hours a week. It's a massive revolution when they walk out of being a draftee into an AFL club, and the expectations. We're getting a bit smarter. When we had 39 of the draftees 2 years ago put up their hand on arrival to say, I have either a hip or a groin problem. They'd done so much work in preparation for it, they were unable to do the program at all when they got there. We have a massive problem that too much, too early, has been talked about before. How much is enough and how much is too much, I don't know the answer to that. But we're dealing that with a lot more often than we used to because of the problems that we've had in getting people over the line to actually start to prepare themselves to play, not being able to get to the line to play or even prepare to play. So the full-time professional now is under a fair bit of expectation, and this is the argument. If you only got 3.4 on average years to make it, 3.4 is the average career length of an AFL footballer. That ain't long. If you've only got that long, then we need to fast-track them. They probably need to be full-time into the program. They ought to go home mentally, physically, in every way, absolutely exhausted, rest up, recover and sleep and come back for some more the next day. I don't actually agree with that principle, but we've got most of our coaches who do. More is a better philosophy, and I don't think more is better. And you can see where the full-time professional has gone now, and I'm not so sure for that's the betterment of everybody. We have 6 core stages for our talent development, pre-AFL draft and post-AFL, and along the lines that we just talked about before, fundamental, sampling stage, identification stage, specialising stage into the league club, and this is our investment where we spend a heck of a lot of time and energy and money and personnel to try and make you as good as you can, and when we get you to potential level, then somehow we've got to maintain that. Isn't easy to do without a very well regulated program. Twice yearly the kids on report, this is going through in our special, go through a key performance appraisal along those 14 things down there on the left. They are actually appraised and scored and rated according to that right-hand scale, rare, excellent, good, marginal or poor. And this gives the opportunities for recruiters to see where they are and how they're developing and compare them one with another. That's pretty stringent stuff for a 17 or 18-year-old to be put under. And then, like kicking ability, which has become the crucial, we can't kick your round ball at all. That's why we got belted again. I think we got belted again. I can remember I was the coach who... I was banished straight away. I was the coach who coached the first losing Australian international team in Australia, and I think about 1999. I say that was in the last century. I lost my job. We got done again. But our ability to kick this oblong-shaped ball has become the crucial element in our game. We understand you can get it. We understand you can make good decisions. We understand you've got all of those elements. You've got the fitness and things to drive it. But if you can't kick the ball, you're dead in the water in our game now. That's short, long, sideways, over your head, round the corner, whatever you like. And we have great difficulties with that. A lot of great kids who can play our game but can't kick get lost in transit. The AIS AFL Academy, we choose 30 kids each year at 16. We put them into the Australian Institute of Sport, which is the AFL Academy, and they have those 7 core areas in which they are exposed to by the so-called expert. And you can read those: injury prevention, physical conditioning, AFL football, that is the fundamentals of our game, etc., skill development, nutrition recovery, personal development, and the AFL policies. And they're very strong on that. When I heard terrific stuff being done with the alcohol today, the AFL is working extremely hard, as you can see down the right-hand side, in terms of developing well-rounded, reasonably balanced people, trying very hard. I'm not sure that it's happening in the way that we would like. But, and this has been my work, I guess, with the students I have at the university and the young people I'm with, we've come to grips, I think, or we're starting to come to grips with who you're working with. And this generation is different. When I walked into a class at the start of last year, and there's a long-haired yit sitting on a chair in the doorway, and I had to walk sideways past him to get into the lecture theatre. I had the 30-odd students doing the course. And I looked at him, I said, are you with us or against us? He looked at me and I said, well, I'll make it easier. Are you in or out? And he had a look at his chair and he said, I think I'm in. I said, well, would you like to bring your chair in with the rest and be a part of the group? And he lifted up his chair reluctantly and took one step forward and sat down. I said, why are you here? He said, what do you mean, why am I here? I said, well, what are you doing here? He said, this is HSC 205, isn't it? I said, that's correct. I said, well, but why are you here? He said, to do this subject. What do you think I'm here for? I said, well, I thought you might have given me a different answer. So I went round the group, spoke to the next girl. I said, why are you here? She said, well, you won't know, but I'm an Australian basketball. I play for the Opals. I've just been to the World Championships. She said, I have a passion for basketball. I can't believe anybody's got a passion for basketball. Great game if you start at 99 points each and play for 5 minutes. She said, I think by doing this course I'll be better in the gym, I'll be better on the court, I'll be better in the office, I'll be able to manage a budget and manage people. She articulated an extremely good answer. And I went around to a few others and they tried their hardest to say why they were sitting in this room at this time. Then I turned round, having given him some thinking time, at which point he stood up and did a U-turn and disappeared out the door. Never happened before. I stupidly chased him. I put my hand on his shoulder. He physically hit my hand away. He said, what are you doing? I said, what are you doing? He said, mate, I've just worked out I shouldn't be here. And I said, well, it's a massive decision to make on the run. I'll be very disappointed if you didn't come back into the class, and we'll talk about it afterwards. But by the look on your face, you're not going to come back. So at 10 o'clock when we finish, I'll be in building J at 3.16. I'll meet you there, buy you a cup of coffee and we'll have a talk about it. He said, mate, have a look at the face. You'll never lay eyes on it again. Did a U-turn and walked off down the corridor, and he's been good to his word because I've never, ever seen him again. Now, that's the kind of generation that I'm dealing with, and I'm having great difficulty with that. But I've got to understand, and we need to understand, because we're doing it. They want it now. Not going to wait for it. They want it to happen right now. The person, the coach, whoever it is, the mother, the father, they don't know best. They might think they do, but this person probably doesn't know that they aren't necessarily the fount of all knowledge. It takes a lot more convincing if you understand when you were talking to them now. They want the evidence. They'll always ask questions. They want to know the relevance for them and how it fits them and how it's going to help them be better. They seem to lose interest, I think, very quickly if they're not actually doing it. And that's the next point. They want to participate. They want to learn by doing. I was delighted to sit in with an AFL coach during this last season where he did a review for an hour and 10 minutes. He not at any stage in the hour and 10 minutes told them anything. Didn't tell them anything. He constantly asked probing questions of them. He did the instant freeze, instant replay all the time. What are you seeing? What do you see now that you didn't see then? Which is the option you'd use now? Which is the best? And they were with him on the edge of their seats the whole way. I thought, how good is that? They were participating and in it. The electronic communication just about done me. I'm having a nervous breakdown with all the things that they want to talk to me with and on. But that's the way they are. And if I don't go quickly with them, I get left behind. And they're certainly much more savvy, I think, and better educated than we were at the same age. So what do you need to know? You need to know their personal goals. They want to talk about them. They want to write them down. They want to review them with you. And I've been delighted with these kids in the Yarra Junior League when they sit with me just for 10 minutes, say, this is why I'm here, this is what I want to get out of it, let's write it down, and we check it out when it's over. Did it happen? Why did it happen? Or why didn't it happen? And I think that's fantastic to do, and that's come up about 5 or 6 times today. Can't underpin that much. Spend time with your players other than, and we talk about their NFEs, their non-football engagement as well about their football, but with representative sides we don't have the time to do that. With AFL footballers I did it all the time. Be more of a mentor and less of a boss. That's what they're expecting from you. Provide the opportunities for continual learning and building of their skills. Remember that, the importance of the informal communication. We're onto the stuff, email, and all the stuff that we're using these days, but they want to talk to you just as much as they do want to use that electronic means of communication with you. They want regular. We've heard it 10 times today. They want regular, they want frequent, but they want it constructive in feedback. And we talked about what did Doc talk about today? 1 versus 5. They want 5 positive before we can give them a hit up the hooter. They need that. And that's this generation is very, very dependent on that. Yeah, they want you to be using all that's available, that's possible to be available. I've got a young player in our street. There's a little fellow called number 5 for the Hawthorn Football Club, little chubby bloke who didn't choose his parents very well. Sam Mitchell, his name is, number 5. You see him on the television. And he's become an unbelievable footballer. Can't run out of sight in the dark night, gets exploited on the outside, but he's so good at winning contested balls, such a good decision maker, he's become one of the geniuses in the competition. And when he tells me about what he goes through on their review day on Monday, starting at 7:30 in the morning and finishing at 5:30 at night, my heavens, by the end of the day, he must have an extremely good idea of what his specific performance was and how it rated with everybody, coaches and peers and teammates, etc. They use all the technology that's available. How do they process information? Are they learning best by visual, verbal or touch of the kinesthetic cues? We should know that about them. But they want to engage. They want you to engage them. They want you to ask questions. They want you to listen and hear answers and then respond to that accordingly. I think that is absolutely crucial. And we tend to, like I am now, we tend to talk at people all the way. Fabulous book. Unfortunately, it's the Australian who wrote it. Michael McQueen's written a fantastic book, The New Rules of Engagement. And what we finish up by saying, and I'll leave you with this, it's been a terrific educational day for me in the broadest possible sense, and the people I've met and the people I've listened to. Stimulating you do it. I can't believe that 600 or 700 of you have come to give up a day of your time and pay to do it in the hope that you might go away and be better at what you're choosing to do. That is fantastic appraisal of this system that has people giving up time. We're very proud of it too. We will this year, we run a national conference. It's in about 3 weeks' time, and it goes around the various capital cities in Australia. It's in Sydney because Sydney now is adopting their second AFL team, the Greater Western Sydney, where Santana Halpin is playing, I think, this year. Am I right, Pat? He's playing this year. And we'll get about the same. 500 or 600 people will come from all around the country. Some states in Australia are giving the money to their sporting coaches to go and qualify and get better by doing courses. So in Queensland and in South Australia, they'll pay your airfares and your registration to get there. They are so keen on developing the best possible coaches because of the effect that they can have. So whilst we get frustrated and we get irritated and we get confused when we're trying to engage with this particular group, they seem to be aware of their rights, but sometimes not very aware of the responsibilities that go with it. Have a reputation, particularly in our country, that today's youth are brash, self-confident, self-reliant and somewhat arrogant. But I think maybe not. I think when we really start to talk to them, it's a bit of a facade, that they're like any other individuals in any other generation. They have their fears and aspirations aren't quite as strong as we would think. I believe, though, that they really are looking for solid adult role models who provide them with a connection to what I call an authentic life. People who have great values and behaviours that come from that value. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And as a coach, the role you have to play has never been more important, in my humble opinion. And the part you play as an adult in engaging this generation becomes critical, because this role carries great power that you should never forget, and incredible privilege, and I call it the privilege of influence. And you should never ever think that this is not a very important part of the role that you play as a coach. You are in fact, and I'll leave you on this thought, you are in fact shaping the next generation's potential and very much the society's future in which you happen to live. Thank you for listening as well as you have for a long day. Thank you.